Hey, my spookies. Before we get started with the show, I want to give you a quick update on my dog Chicano's cancer battle. It's going very well. He has one more treatment coming next week, and then we can move on together, and I'm so happy to say it. And I also want to say a humongous thank you. We've raised $4,026 against his $8,500 in veterinary bills. This has left me with a lot of peace of mind. And if you want to help, please go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Help My Dog. I really do appreciate any help I can get. But now, my friends, it's time for the show. You go down a winding road in the middle of the country, hoping to get a score in a business that's less than wholesome. But something is lurking in this unsuspecting mansion that no one could have ever guessed, and you are going to come face to face with it tonight.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
Hello, my spookies. It's Wednesday, and you know what that means. It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Enrique Couto, and we have quite the chiller for you tonight. It's spring, but in most of the country, it's still pretty cold, and this story is not going to warm you back up. It will chill you straight to the bone. But before we get to that, I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the program. We make scary stories all year long, not just at Halloween time. And we can keep doing it because you keep listening. So make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app because we have so much more to come, including something very special for our 200th episode. And while you have your favorite podcasting app open, why not leave us a star rating? Whether on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, or anything else you use to listen to podcasts, that rating helps bring in brand new listeners. When they see 155 people have enjoyed the show, they know to give it a shot. And if you want to help in a much more direct way, of course you can go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 every month, you get exclusive podcasts, behind-the-scenes looks at everything we do, and so very much more. And I have one more plug for you before we get to the story, and that is, we here at Weekly Spooky produced a television series. That's right, over at Tubi TV, Tubi TV. We have a show called Found Footage the Series, which features many terrifying stories that I know you'll like if you like this show, and it's free to watch. So go to Tubi TV, type in Found Footage the Series, and give it a watch. But now, my friends, it's about time for the story, and it's a doozy. And we'll get to it right after these quick words. Crime and Bedevilment by Joe Solmo. Damn it, Mickey, what did I tell you? Brandon said, slamming the butt of his pistol down on the hood of the Ford pickup. Rust rained down on the tall grass along the side of the country road. To dress inconsequential, Mickey replied, looking up at his older brother. 10 years separated them, so they hadn't grown up close. Rather, the brothers grew closer as they both realized they liked stealing. Must be in their blood. Their father had been in prison since Brandon was just 14. Mickey barely remembered him at all. Inconspicuous, you idiot! You look like a goddamn cartoon. Under that all-black outfit and black ski mask, you wearing a raccoon-eyed mask, striped shirt, and a bag with a big fucking $sign on it? Brandon sneered. Just my regular clothes. I didn't know there was a fucking uniform for criming, Mickey responded. He pulled the black hoodie over his head and tossed it onto the grass against the fence. His hair rose in the dry, static, charged air of the northeast. Jesus fucking Christ, Brandon said and shook his head. He couldn't help but laugh. Under the hoodie, Mickey was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. The ridiculous bright colors assaulted his sight. Were you dropped on your head as a child? Ma would never have done that to me. I was her favorite, Mickey said proudly. His white-toothed smile cut through the fading light. Fuck your mother. She was quite the looker back in the day. Did you see their wedding album? Mickey asked. For fuck's sake, go check the lock on the gate before you reach a point where you couldn't possibly disappoint me more, Brandon said, and checked the contents of the backpack on the ripped seat of the Ford. He'd be mad about the rip, but it wasn't his truck. Mickey wandered over to the gate and wiggled the wrought iron. It clanked in its locked housing. He shook his head as he dug in his back pocket for the tools he needed to get it open. And another thing, Brandon said as he approached. When you steal a getaway vehicle, never go forward. We don't need to be breaking down when the cops are chasing. Use what little brains you got, will ya? I can't concentrate when you're picking on me, Mickey said, jamming a small straight piece of metal into the lock. I'm a little jumpy is all. My heart's racing like I drank a 30-pack of Mountain Dew. This could be a big score. You saw the escort the lady got from the room with the safe deposits back at the bank. Whatever was in that box they carried to her Audi has to be worth a fortune. I'm glad we noticed her. It'll be so much easier to rob one woman than a whole bank, Brandon explained. Just watch the driveway. I almost got it, Mickey said, and an audible clink was heard. The old, rusty gate swung in towards them a few inches with a creak. Mickey turned to his brother with a smug smile and leaned his back on the gate. Now who's the idiot? His eyes grew large as the gate swung shut behind him, the lock clicking in place. My opinion hasn't changed, brother, Brandon said. Now hurry up. It's about to snow and I bet that beater Ford ain't got no snow tires. I noticed it's a two-wheel drive. Who the fuck buys a two-wheel drive truck? What's the fucking point? Hey, let me grab that hoodie. I'm freezing, Mickey said before working on the lock again. After a few moments, they were making their way up the long driveway leading to a large house, looming in the distance. The sun was setting behind the house, making it a black rectangle to the brothers. A row of trees lined either side of the gravel drive, and Brandon had them weave through them on the approach to avoid detection. Brandon, I just thought of something, Mickey said, halting behind a tree. He was out of breath already and needed to stop. That's dangerous, although I am curious as this is your first one, Brandon retorted. Seriously, what if they have big dogs roaming the grounds or something? You would think a rich lady like this would have some kind of protection way out here. You carry a steak in your pants? No, but I have a peanut butter granola protein bar, in case we're out late. I bring them because I know you can't have them and won't eat it on me like you do those chocolate ones, Mickey replied. Looks like you're doomed then. Come on, let's get this over with. You remember the plan? Brandon asked. You scope out the house quick to see how many people are inside. We come in from opposite ends and round people into the living room. Then we make the bitch get the box from the bank. We tie them up and we leave. Mickey repeated the plan Brandon told him earlier. Yeah, no need to actually hurt anyone. If we gotta, sure. I ain't got no problem laying the bitch to rest to get away or something, but just don't get carried away. Remember, no names once we are in there, Brandon said. What if I have to get your attention? What do I call you? Call me Willy Wonka, Brandon said sarcastically. Mickey gave him a confused look for a second and then whispered the name back, like he was committing it to memory. Brandon reached into the bag and pulled out a flashlight and checked that it worked, lighting up the ground below them. He tucked it into his belt buckle and shivered. The temperature had dropped and the first flakes of snow started to fall. "We better hurry. This snow means footprints," Brandon said. "Wait here." "Okay, Willy Wonka," Mickey said with a seriousness that made Brandon crack a smile. He took off towards the house in a jog, leaving Mickey leaning against the large oak tree. He noticed some scratches in the bark of the tree and started to carve his initials into it out of boredom. Then, at the last minute, realized that was a dumb mistake. Although he couldn't read what the other people had carved, it looked like 4 lines. He didn't want to leave evidence. Brandon would get super pissed at him if he did. "I have to smarten up like Brandon says," Mickey muttered and put his knife away. The large flakes of snow had already covered the ground with a dusting. He always loved the silence of a snowfall. It's like everything pauses to enjoy the natural beauty. He thought about his cut of the job. "I might retire to Aspen. I bet it looks like this all the time there," he thought. "Or maybe Maine or Alaska. You can have the beaches and their crowds and washed up needles and garbage. Fuck them sharks. I'd rather have to fight a polar bear than a shark anyways," he said to the night. "Who you fighting?" Brandon said, returning from his recon mission. "Not sharks, that's for sure," Mickey replied, confusing Brandon further. The older brother shook his head to clear the nonsense and get his thoughts back on track. "Follow me," Brandon said, and led them closer to the house. They ducked down behind the Audi they saw the woman drive earlier. A layer of snow covered the red paint. They eyed the front door. "I didn't see no cameras. I think we're good." "What's that on the door?" Mickey asked, looking at a strange symbol. "Probably the family crest or something. Nothing for us to worry about. I don't give a fuck who the old bitch is as long as she gives us the goods in that box," Brandon said. "It looks like the funny writing the Egyptians did," Mickey said. "I need you to focus on the job, not what's on the door. It don't mean nothing to us," Brandon whispered through chattering teeth. "The only lights on in the house is in the den in the back. I'll go around there and enter. You come through this front door and meet me there. I heard her talking to someone, but I think it's just the two of them. It shouldn't be a problem." "Okay, Brandon, I'm focused. I'm really trying to smarten up, you know. I'm just not wired for it. I'll do my best," Mickey said. "You better do better than that," Brandon said, and started to move. His boots made a wet squeak as he took a step. "They're gonna hear you coming like that," Mickey said. "I told you not to buy those cheap-ass boots from the drugstore. Should have ordered some like I did," Mickey said, jumping up and down to show his brother that his shoes don't squeak. "Will you knock that off? Give me your boots," Brandon demanded. "Fuck off. This time I was smarter, and I'm gonna reap the rewards. Warm, toasty feet," Mickey said with a grin. "Fuck it," Brandon said, and took his boots off, stuffing them in the bag of break-in tools. "Give me to the count of 20, then go in the front door. You can count that high, right?" "Sure can. That's all my fingers twice. Here, I'll show you. 1, 2. Mickey held both middle fingers to his brother. "You're lucky I don't thump you right now," Brandon said. He headed around the corner of the house. Mickey started to count. He would never give his brother the satisfaction of knowing that he did have to count it out on his fingers. Besides, why does it matter? I still get to 20, he thought. At 20, Mickey headed to the door. When he got closer, he got a better look at the door. The symbol on it wasn't the pictures of Egyptians, but the circle with the star that he'd seen in countless horror movies. He didn't like it one bit. He knew if he didn't go in, his brother would likely give him that thumping, so he grabbed the knob and turned it, half hoping it would be locked and he would have an excuse not to enter. But, much to his chagrin, it opened right up. "Son of a bitch," Mickey said and pulled the pistol from his waist. It wasn't loaded. Brandon wouldn't let him carry real bullets, and most of the time just seeing the gun was enough for them to get what they wanted from people anyway. He entered the door and headed towards the light coming from the end of the hallway in front of him. He was just a few feet from the end of the hall when he heard Brandon's voice telling the people in the room to sit down and put their hands where he could see them. He rounded the doorframe and saw a large room lit by a large fireplace and more candles than he'd ever seen in his life, like a whole church amount. The symbol from the door was on the floor in some kind of white substance. A well-muscled man wearing nothing but leather pants and a ball gag was on his knees, and the bitch from the bank was wearing some kind of black plastic skin-tight catsuit. Brandon was standing near the curtained windows at the far side of the room, gun in his hand. The woman dropped what appeared to be a large dog's chew toy on the floor. She moved back a few steps to a plush chair, and the man crawled over and sat by her booted feet. "What the fuck is going on in here?" Mickey asked. The man turned to him and snarled through the gag. The woman looked up at him. She had the strangest eyes. All black, no white at all. It was unnerving. Mickey wondered if black eyes could see in the dark better. Maybe they were more light sensitive. That's why the mood lighting with the fucking candles. "Seems this old hag got herself a boy toy, and she's into kinky shit," Brandon said, pointing the gun at her. His eyes scanned the room looking for the box they saw her leave the bank with. He found it on a table near the fireplace. "Brother, grab the box." "Common thieves. How pathetic," the woman said and started to stand up. "Move again and I will plug you," Brandon said. "You have no idea what you've stumbled upon, do you? This is almost comical," the woman said and stood up, her skin-tight suit creaking as she did so. Blam! Everyone froze, everyone except the man on his knees at the foot of the woman. He fell over onto the floor, blood pooling under him. "Consider that a warning," Brandon said. "You said no killing unless it was necessary," Mickey yelled out. "You fool," the woman called out and raised her hand. She said something in another language, and suddenly Brandon found himself a few inches in the air, arms tight against his body. He couldn't move. It hurt to breathe. He dropped the gun on the floor. "Do you have any idea how long it takes to properly train them? Years to do it right. Tonight, I was going to reward his obedience and make him one of the protectors. The guardians of the sisterhood. How we waited for the right solstice, and you buffoons ruined it," the woman yelled. Mickey could see a power in her black eyes that scared him. He forgot that his gun didn't work and squeezed the trigger. The woman heard the click and sent a wave of force at Mickey. He fell over the ottoman and onto the hardwood floor. She turned her attention back to Brandon. She motioned him over towards the box. "You want what's inside?" she asked. "You have to have it, do you? Worth killing for?" "Look, lady, we were just looking for an easy score. Things got out of hand," Brandon gasped between pained breaths, second-guessing the night's plan. "Out of hand? My chosen lay dead." She made a spinning motion, and Brandon began to rotate in front of her. "I guess you will have to do." She opened the box and pulled out the contents, turning back to him. Brandon's greedy eyes fell on the object in her hand, and his expression changed from one of greed to confusion, then to disappointment. Mickey knew that look all too well. It was the one his brother gave him the most. He hated that look. He had to try harder to be a good brother. But what could he do? "A fucking dog collar?" Brandon asked incredulously. "That's what you kept at the bank for safekeeping?" "Not just any collar, boy," she said and undid the clasp on it. "This one is special, made by mad monks of Monmouth, commissioned by the head sister, Agatha, my mother, in 1080 AD, to protect us from the dark times of man. The coven needed muscle to act when magic had to remain hidden in the shadows. You will now be the protector of our coven. You will take his place," she explained, nodding at the corpse on the floor. She placed the collar on Brandon. A flash filled the room as she closed the clasp. "Put my brother down," Mickey said with as steady a voice as he could muster. "Don't test me, boy. You've tried that trick before," the woman said, and waved her hand dismissively at him, but not before he pulled the trigger on the gun. This time, it rang out as the bullet escaped the barrel of Brandon's pistol and entered the old witch in the chest. She fell back in surprise, losing her magical grip on Brandon, who fell to the floor. He began to cough, trying to breathe. Mickey unloaded into the woman, making sure she wasn't going to get back up. A tear fell down his cheek. He had never shot anyone before. He knew it was going to stick with him for a long while. The look on her face. He threw the gun down and turned towards his brother. "I did good, Brandon?" he asked. "Sure did, little bro." "Help me up," Brandon said, regaining some strength. Mickey held his arm around his brother. "Help me get this fucking thing off." They both fumbled with the clasp, but it wouldn't come off. "We're gonna need some tools," Mickey said, looking around for the backpack. Just then, they heard a cell phone ringing. Mickey found it on the table and picked it up. He saw the wide-eyed look and disappointment in Brandon's eyes when he answered it. Well, what was he supposed to do? Let it ring? He hated the sound of a ringing phone. Who doesn't keep it on silent nowadays?
"Carmela? Carmela, dear, we're running a bit late. I'm afraid the snow has slowed us. We should arrive by 9. See you then."
Mickey and Brandon looked up at the clock above the fireplace. It was 15 till 9. "We need to get the fuck out of here," Brandon said. "Grab the bag and the guns. We can fuck with this collar once we're gone." Mickey did as he was told. Brandon took the candles and placed them by the long curtains on the window, the flames licking the fabric. "Come on, this place is going to burn down," Brandon said, and headed for the back door. As they made their way through the snow of the yard, they saw headlights coming up the drive. "Shit, get down!" Brandon yelled. They both flattened in the snow to avoid detection. They let the car pass and got up, watching the limo reach the house. Flames could be seen through the front windows. With any luck, no one will see what happened inside. Brandon led the way down the slope toward the fence and the waiting jalopy of a Ford Mickey had stolen. Brother?" Mickey said, looking down at the snow in front of him. Brandon stopped. "Are you okay?" Mickey asked. Brandon muttered something under his breath that Mickey assumed was him being mean. It sounded coarse and angry. Mickey bent down in the darkness to get a better look at the snow. His brother's footprint was unrecognizable. It looked odd, wider with a center sunk in. 4 other indentations near the front. It took Mickey a moment to realize what he saw. It was a dog's footprint. Did they really have large dogs on the grounds prowling for intruders? He fucking knew it! Brandon made a noise. Mickey looked up at him. "What was that?" he asked. When Brandon didn't move, Mickey walked around him to see his brother's face. But what he saw horrified him. Short, coarse hair covered his face. His nose had grown and his lips, black like an old dog's, parted, showing sharp, carnivorous teeth. "What did that bitch do to you?" Mickey asked. Just then, shouts from behind them rang out. Shadows fell on them as people approached. Brandon snarled and bounded off towards them. Mickey ran for it the other way. The gate was in sight. All he had to do was reach the truck. He ran so fast his feet were slipping in the snow on the wet grass. He almost fell twice. The second time, he grabbed the gate to save himself. Behind him, he heard screaming and an inhuman roar that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He put the hood up on the black hoodie he was wearing and slipped through the fence. The truck was just where he left it. He was so glad that he had the keys and didn't give them to his brother like he usually did. He yanked the door open and climbed in. He jammed the key in the ignition in a panic and twisted it. Nothing happened. "Not now! Oh, fuck!" he said and tried again. Again, nothing happened. Was the battery dead? He listened and heard no noise from behind the gate. Was his brother okay? He popped the hood release and reached for the handle on the door, opening it about 6 inches before it was slammed shut on him. The snarling face of his brother's new form pressed up against the glass of the door, steaming it in its hot breath. Blood splattered from its mouth and smeared as the monstrosity tried to come through the pane of glass. "We can fix this! We just gotta get that bitch's collar off of you," Mickey said. He reached onto the seat behind him for something. Anything to protect himself. He grabbed cold metal and brought it around between him and the window. He noticed a crack in the glass as the truck shook from the attack. He looked down at his hands and saw he was holding their crowbar. He raised it up towards his brother. "See, I can pry that thing off," he said, hopefully. The sound of splintering glass rang in Mickey's ears. He flinched and closed his eyes for just a second, but that was long enough for the long, hairy arms to break through and reach for him. He held out the crowbar, but it was knocked from his hands. In desperation, he looked around for anything he could use to defend himself from his brother. "Come on, we've been through a lot. We got this," Mickey called out as he patted his pockets. He stopped on the bulge in his left front jeans pocket and dug in, pulling out his protein bar. The creature his brother had turned into climbed half in the truck, taking up the driver's side as it swung wildly at him. It opened its mouth and howled to the night. When it did, its blood-stained teeth parted, and Mickey saw down the creature's throat. He wondered if the people from the limo earlier also had seen this view before they were devoured. He hesitated, even though he knew what he had to do. He thought back to the time when he was a kid and was grounded, and his brother snuck him out to play with his Tonka trucks in the dirt driveway. He started to sniffle as the memories flooded of the times they shared growing up. He remembered the time Brandon had accidentally eaten a peanut butter cookie and had to be hospitalized. He had saved his brother's life that day. His vision was obscured with tears as he said his final words to his brother. "I'm sorry, Willy Wonka." He threw the protein bar right down his brother's throat. The beast choked once, then twice, then backed out of the truck. It clenched its throat. Mickey watched as his brother's canine tongue swelled up and lolled from one side of his head as the monster made heaving noises and the weirdest breathing sounds Mickey had ever heard. It stumbled back against a tree, its bestial claws tearing into its own throat, trying to remove the protein bar. Blood gushed over the fur as bloody puke exploded both out of his mouth and the wound in his neck in a glorious fountain. "I'll never eat fondue again," Mickey said as he watched on in horror, never taking his eyes off his brother, even as he tried the key again, and this time, that piece of shit truck roared to life. Go figure. The last thing Mickey saw as he drove off was his brother's wolf head hanging from the neck sideways as the beast collapsed to the ground, having nearly decapitating himself to relieve the allergic reaction. "Bet he didn't see that coming," Mickey said as he raced down the lane back towards the highway. He never made it, though. His brother was right. The truck didn't have snow tires, and he went into the ravine next to the country road. They found his body the next morning, when the firefighters were on their way back from fighting the house fire. Well, talk about a stark ending to quite a tale. And yes, that pun was intentional. Well, it may not have been intentional initially, but I'm claiming it, and none of you can take it away from me. I hope you enjoyed this week's story. We're going to be back this coming Monday with another episode of Terrifying and True, and this one is especially interesting because it was submitted by a listener, and it's all about murder in the heartland of Ohio. And if you want to make sure the spooky keeps on coming and coming, make sure to go to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and become a patron of the show. For as little as $1 a month, you get bonus episodes, a behind-the-scenes look at everything we do, and a whole lot more on top of our undying gratitude. So join 95 other spookies at weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. And if you want to hang out with the spookies, go to Facebook and search for Weekly Spookies Tomb of Terror. It's where all of us hang out, share memes, talk about scary movies and scary stories, and just have a great time. It's a cool community over at Facebook. It's the Weekly Spooky Tomb of Terror. But now I want to take a moment to thank our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the program. And they are Bobbletopia.com, where you can use code WeeklySpooky at checkout for 10% off. Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Christopher Sullivan, Brent McCullough, Gino Lyons, Steve King, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much for supporting the show. And if you want to hear your name at the end of every single episode, just go to weeklyspooky.com, click on Patreon, and select any tier over $15 a month. But now, my friends, it's time for me to get out of here. This weekend, I'm going to be in Cleveland, Ohio at Cinema Wasteland, so if you happen to be in the neighborhood, stop on by and say hello. But for now, for myself, my producer Dan Wilder, my executive producer Rob Fields, and my composer Ray Mattis, I will talk at you later.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.